Maria Santos had always been different from other pilots. While her fellow Apache helicopter pilots focused on technical manuals and flight procedures, she found joy in the smallest things. Her infectious laugh could be heard across the military base even during the most serious briefings. Her commanding officers often shook their heads, wondering how someone so cheerful had ended up flying one of the most deadly machines in modern warfare. The morning of March 15th started like any other. Maria performed her pre-flight checks on her AH-64 Apache, running her hands along the sleek metal frame that had become like a second home to her. The helicopter was a beast of war, armed with Hellfire missiles and a 30mm cannon, but to Maria, it was simply her partner in the sky. She had named it Dancing Eagle because of how gracefully it moved through the air under her control. "Santos, you're cleared for routine patrol over Sector 7, came the voice through her headset. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission along the border, nothing more than watching for unusual activity. Maria strapped herself in, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. The Apache's twin engines roared to life, and within moments, she was airborne. The landscape below stretched endlessly, a patchwork of desert and scattered settlements. Maria hummed quietly to herself as she flew, a habit that had earned her both admiration and concern from her fellow pilots. How could someone remain so lighthearted while operating a machine designed for destruction? But that was Maria's gift. She found beauty even in the darkest places. Her radar screen was clear, showing nothing but empty sky and peaceful terrain below. The mission seemed routine until her communication system crackled with an urgent transmission. "All units, we have reports of unidentified aircraft in your vicinity. Maintain high alert and report any unusual activity immediately." Maria's trained eyes scanned the horizon, but she saw nothing out of the ordinary. Her Apache continued its steady patrol, the afternoon sun reflecting off its dark green paint. She began to relax again, thinking the alert might have been a false alarm. That's when she noticed something glinting in the distance, small dots moving fast across the sky, heading directly toward her position. At first, she thought they might be fellow military aircraft, perhaps on a training exercise she hadn't been informed about. But as the dots grew larger, her blood ran cold. These weren't friendly aircraft. The sleek, aggressive lines of fighter jets became clear through her targeting system, and they were moving with obvious hostile intent. "Control, this is Santos. I have visual on multiple fast movers approaching my position. They appear to be non-friendly aircraft." Maria's voice remained steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. Her years of training kicked in as she began evasive maneuvers, using the Apache's agility to her advantage. The radio crackled back with confusion and concern. "Santos, we show no scheduled aircraft in your area. Can you identify the aircraft? Type?" But Maria was already too busy staying alive to respond immediately. The first missiles streaked past her Apache, close enough that she could feel the heat through the cockpit. Her laughter, which had been such a constant companion throughout her military career, bubbled up despite the mortal danger. Not because she found the situation funny, but because it was her way of processing extreme stress. Other pilots might curse or panic, but Maria laughed. It was a sound that had comforted her squad mates through countless difficult missions. "They're really trying to ruin my perfect flying record," she said into her microphone, a hint of that familiar laugh coloring her words. She threw the Apache into a sharp banking turn, using every trick she had learned in her years of combat training. The helicopter responded like an extension of her own body, diving and weaving through the increasingly intense barrage of enemy fire. The jets, she could now count at least 4 of them, were clearly military-grade and flown by experienced pilots. This wasn't some random encounter with rogue aircraft. This was a coordinated attack, and Maria found herself wondering who would send such overwhelming force against a single Apache helicopter on a routine patrol mission. As the chase intensified, Maria realized she was probably not going to make it home for dinner that night. The odds were heavily stacked against her, but she refused to give up without a fight. Her Apache might be outnumbered, but it was far from defenseless. She armed her weapon systems and prepared to show these mysterious attackers exactly what a determined pilot in a well-armed helicopter could accomplish. The sky around her erupted in a deadly dance of missiles and gunfire. But through it all, Maria's distinctive laugh continued to echo through the radio communications, a sound that would soon become the last thing her enemies would ever hear. The first enemy missile exploded so close to Maria's Apache that the shrapnel peppered the armored hull like deadly rain. Her helicopter shuddered, but held together, testament to the engineering that had gone into building these war machines. Maria immediately dropped altitude, using the desert terrain to mask her position while her mind raced through tactical options. Control, I need immediate backup. 4 enemy jets, unknown origin, engaging in hostile action. Maria's voice remained, surprisingly calm as she spoke into her headset, even as another explosion rocked the air nearby. The radio response was filled with static and confusion. Her base was scrambling to understand how enemy aircraft had penetrated so deep into friendly airspace without detection. Through her targeting system, Maria got her first clear look at her attackers. The jets were sleek, modern fighters with unmarked wings. No national insignia, no squadron markings, nothing to identify where they had come from or who had sent them. Professional mercenaries, perhaps, or Black Ops pilots on a mission so secret that even their aircraft carried no identification. Maria banked hard to the left as another missile screamed past her rotor blades. Her Apache's defensive systems were working overtime, launching flares and chaff to confuse incoming projectiles. But she knew she couldn't keep dodging forever. The jets had speed and altitude advantage while she had maneuverability and the element of surprise that comes from being underestimated. "Let's see how you handle a little Apache dancing," Maria muttered to herself, her characteristic laugh bubbling up despite the mortal danger. She pulled her helicopter into a maneuver that would have been impossible for a larger aircraft. A tight spiral that brought her Apache around behind one of the pursuing jets. Her 30mm cannon roared to life, sending a stream of armor-piercing rounds toward the enemy aircraft. The jet pilot realized too late that he had underestimated the helicopter's capabilities. Maria's rounds found their target, tearing through the fighter's left wing and sending it spinning out of control. The pilot ejected just moments before his aircraft smashed into the desert floor in a ball of orange flame and black smoke. 1. Down 3 to go, Maria announced over the radio, and this time her laugh was clearly audible to everyone listening. It wasn't the laugh of someone losing her mind under pressure. It was the laugh of someone who had just proven that a single Apache helicopter could hold its own against supposedly superior enemy aircraft. The remaining 3 jets regrouped quickly, their pilots now taking the lone helicopter much more seriously. They spread out in a coordinated attack pattern, trying to catch Maria in a crossfire that would make it impossible for her to evade all their weapons simultaneously. But Maria had been flying Apaches for over 8 years, and she knew her aircraft's capabilities better than anyone. She dove toward the rocky terrain below, using the natural landscape as cover while her Apache's advanced targeting system tracked all 3 remaining enemies. The helicopter's radar-absorbent coating and low profile made it difficult for the jets to maintain a solid lock on her position, buying her precious seconds to plan her next move. Maria's military training had taught her that when outnumbered, the key was to never fight all enemies at once, divide and conquer. She waited until the 3 jets began to separate, then struck like lightning at the closest one. Her Hellfire missiles were designed to destroy tanks and bunkers, but they worked just as well against aircraft when properly targeted. The missile struck the second jet amidships, the explosion so violent that debris rained down across several square miles of desert. The pilot never had a chance to eject. Maria's laugh echoed through the radio channels again, but now it carried a harder edge. She was no longer just defending herself. She was hunting. The 2 remaining enemy pilots seemed to realize they had made a serious error in judgment. What they had expected to be a simple elimination of a lone helicopter had turned into a deadly game of aerial combat with a pilot who refused to die quietly. Their radio chatter, picked up by Maria's communication systems, revealed growing panic and confusion. Maria used their hesitation to her advantage, climbing rapidly to gain altitude while keeping the sun at her back. The Apache's twin engines screamed as she pushed them to their limits, rising like a mechanical bird of prey preparing to strike. Her weapon systems locked onto the 3rd enemy jet, and her finger moved to the trigger. But something made her pause. Through her enhanced optics, she caught a glimpse of the pilot's face in the jet's cockpit. He looked young, probably not much older than her own nephew. For a split second, Maria felt a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but a recognition of shared humanity even in the midst of deadly combat. That moment of hesitation nearly cost her everything. The fourth jet, which she had momentarily lost track of, appeared from behind a rocky ridge with its weapons already firing. Maria threw her Apache into a desperate evasive roll, but she knew she might have waited too long. The enemy pilot had her dead to rights, and there was nowhere left to run. The fourth jet's cannon fire erupted in a deadly stream of light, but Maria's split-second hesitation had actually saved her life. Her Apache dropped like a stone just as the rounds passed through the space where she had been hovering. The enemy pilot had led his target perfectly, but Maria's unexpected pause had thrown off his calculations by just enough to keep her alive. Maria's laughter filled the radio channels again, but this time it carried a note of pure adrenaline-fueled joy. She had just cheated death by accident, and somehow found it hilarious rather than terrifying. Her Apache pulled out of the dive barely 50 feet above the desert floor, so low that the rotor wash kicked up clouds of sand and debris. "Control, I could really use that backup any time now," Maria called out, her voice still tinged with amusement despite the desperate situation. The radio crackled back with promises of help, but she knew that even the fastest jets from her base were still minutes away. In aerial combat, minutes might as well be hours. The two remaining enemy jets had learned to respect her capabilities, but they still held significant advantages. They coordinated their attack carefully, one diving from high altitude while the other approached from the side, trying to catch her in an impossible crossfire. Maria watched their approach through her targeting system, her mind calculating angles and distances with the precision of a human computer. Instead of trying to evade both attacks, Maria did something completely unexpected. She flew directly toward the diving jet, closing the distance so rapidly that the enemy pilot barely had time to register what was happening. At the last possible moment, Maria pulled her Apache into a vertical climb, rising like an elevator shot from a cannon. The diving jet pilot tried to follow her climb, but his aircraft was moving too fast to make such a sharp change in direction. He streaked past beneath her, and Maria immediately rolled her helicopter over into an attack position. Her 30mm cannon spoke again, and this time, there was no escape for the enemy pilot. The jet disintegrated in midair, pieces scattered across miles of empty desert. "That's 3 down," Maria announced cheerfully, as if she were keeping score in a friendly sports match rather than fighting for her life. Her laughter bubbled up again, that distinctive sound that had become her trademark among the other pilots. On base. But now, to the remaining enemy pilot, it must have sounded like the voice of death itself. The last enemy jet had seen enough. Through her communication intercepts, Maria could hear the panic in the pilot's voice as he reported to his unknown commanders. This wasn't going according to their plan at all. What should have been a simple elimination mission had turned into a nightmare, with a single Apache helicopter systematically destroying an entire flight of advanced fighter jets. Maria could have let him run. She had proven her point and eliminated the immediate threat. But something about the whole situation bothered her. These jets hadn't just happened to encounter her during a routine patrol. They had been waiting for her, positioned perfectly, to intercept her flight path. This had been an ambush carefully planned and expertly executed, except for one small detail they hadn't counted on. They hadn't expected Maria Santos. The last enemy pilot was desperately calling for extraction, but Maria wasn't about to let him escape to fight another day. She pushed her Apache to its maximum speed, chasing the fleeing jet across the desert landscape. The enemy aircraft was faster, but Maria knew these skies better than anyone. She knew every canyon, every ridge, every thermal updraft that could give her an advantage. She herded the enemy jet like a sheepdog driving livestock, using her intimate knowledge of the terrain to cut off escape routes and force the pilot toward a box canyon she knew well. The enemy pilot realized too late that he was being driven into a trap. The canyon walls rose steeply on both sides with only one way out, directly through Maria's waiting weapons. "End of the line, friend," Maria said softly into her microphone. Her laughter replaced by cold determination. The enemy pilot tried to climb straight up, desperate to escape the canyon's confines, but Maria had positioned herself perfectly. Her final Hellfire missile streaked upward, finding its target with devastating precision. The explosion echoed off the canyon walls like thunder, the sound rolling across the desert for miles in every direction. Burning debris rained down into the sandy floor of the canyon, but Maria was already turning her Apache around, heading back toward open sky. "Control. Threat eliminated. 4 enemy aircraft destroyed. I'm RTB. Returning to base." Maria's voice was calm and professional again, but those listening carefully could still hear the echo of laughter beneath her words. As she flew home through the gathering dusk, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had been more than just a random attack. Someone had sent 4 advanced fighter jets specifically to eliminate her, and she had no idea who or why. The thought should have been frightening, but instead she found herself smiling. After all, they had sent jets after one Apache helicopter, and her laugh had been the last thing they heard. Maria's Apache touched down at the base just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the landing pad. Ground crews rushed to her helicopter, their faces showing a mixture of relief and amazement. Word had already spread through the base about her impossible victory against overwhelming odds, and everyone wanted to see the pilot who had single-handedly destroyed an entire enemy squadron. As Maria climbed out of her cockpit, she noticed the unusual number of officers waiting for her. This wasn't the normal post-mission debriefing. Colonel Williams, the base commander, stood alongside several men in dark suits who definitely weren't military. Intelligence agents, Maria realized, though she had no idea which agency they represented. "Outstanding work out there, Santos," Colonel Williams said, but his expression was troubled rather than congratulatory. "We need to talk, all of us." The debriefing room was filled with more people than Maria had ever seen for a routine mission report. Maps covered every wall, and laptop computers displayed radar tracks and communication intercepts. The men in suits introduced themselves with names that sounded fake and credentials that revealed nothing about their real identities. "Those weren't random enemy aircraft," one of the agents began without preamble. "We've been tracking this group for months. They call themselves the Shadow Squadron, highly trained mercenary pilots flying unmarked jets for whoever pays them. Enough. Until today, they had never failed a mission." Maria settled back in her chair, still wearing her flight suit stained with desert dust and sweat. Her helmet sat on the table beside her, bearing the small painted image of a laughing face that had become her personal symbol. "So why did they want me dead? I'm just a regular pilot doing routine patrols." The agents exchanged glances before the lead investigator opened a thick file folder. "3 weeks ago, you were flying patrol over the same sector when you reported seeing unusual ground activity. Movement of vehicles and personnel in what should have been empty desert, do you remember?" Maria nodded slowly. She had indeed reported strange activity, though at the time it had seemed like a minor observation hardly worth mentioning. "I saw some trucks and temporary structures. Looked like maybe smugglers or illegal mining operations. I filed my standard report and thought nothing more about it." "Those weren't smugglers," the agent continued grimly. "You had stumbled across a major arms dealing operation, weapons being moved from international suppliers to terrorist organizations. Your report triggered an investigation that shut down a network worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of very dangerous people lost a lot of money because of what you saw." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Maria's routine patrol and casual observation had accidentally disrupted a massive illegal operation, and now those responsible wanted her eliminated. The Shadow Squadron had been hired to make sure she never had the chance to accidentally discover anything else. "They sent their best pilots," another agent added. 4 jets against 1 helicopter should have been no contest at all. No one expected you to not only survive but to eliminate the entire attack force. Frankly, what you accomplished today should have been impossible. Maria's characteristic laugh bubbled up despite the serious situation. "I guess they underestimated Apache power. And maybe they didn't count on someone who actually enjoys flying these machines. She patted her helmet affectionately. Dancing Eagle and I have been through a lot together. She doesn't give up easy. Colonel Williams leaned forward across the table. The problem is, Santos, that you've now made yourself an even bigger target. The people who hired the Shadow Squadron aren't going to be happy that their expensive mercenaries failed. They'll try again, probably with even more resources. The lead agent nodded grimly. We're recommending immediate relocation to a secure facility while we roll up the rest of their network. These people don't forgive and they don't forget. You've cost them too much money and embarrassed them in front of their clients. Maria stood up and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. Her Apache sat in its parking spot, ground crews still examining it for battle damage. Despite everything that had happened, she felt oddly calm about the whole situation. She had always known that military life carried risks, but she had never imagined that doing her job well would make her a target for international criminals. What kind of timeline are we talking about? She asked, still looking out at her helicopter. How long before they might try again? Could be days, could be weeks, one of the suits replied. Professional mercenary pilots don't grow on trees, especially after you eliminated some of their best people today. But they have resources and connections all over the world. Given enough time, they'll find someone willing to take the contract. Maria turned back to face the room full of concerned officials. Her smile was the same cheerful expression that had carried her through years of military service. But now there was something harder underneath it. So what you're telling me is that some very bad people are angry because I accidentally did my job too well, and now they want to kill me for it. That's about the size of it, Colonel Williams confirmed. Maria's laughter filled the room again, that distinctive sound that had become legendary among the pilots on base. But this time, everyone listening could hear something different in it. It wasn't just amusement or stress relief anymore. It was the laughter of someone who had discovered that she was very, very good at staying alive when people tried to kill her. Well then, Maria said, picking up her helmet and heading for the door. I guess we'd better get ready for round 2. 2 weeks passed in a strange calm that made everyone nervous. Maria had been moved to a secure compound 50 miles from her original base, but she insisted on continuing to fly missions. The intelligence agents argued against it, claiming she should stay grounded until the threat was eliminated, but Maria refused to hide. They want to ground me because I'm too dangerous to the bad guys, she told Colonel Williams during one of their daily briefings. That makes no sense at all. If I'm that effective against them, why would we take me out of the fight? Her new, temporary base was smaller but more heavily defended, with advanced radar systems and air defense missiles that could engage threats at much longer ranges. Maria's Apache had been upgraded too, with additional armor plating and enhanced electronic warfare systems. The aircraft looked the same on the outside, but now it carried technology that hadn't even been classified until a few days ago. Maria noticed the difference immediately when she took Dancing Eagle up for her first test flight at the new location. The helicopter felt heavier but more responsive, and her targeting systems showed capabilities she had never seen before. Someone had spent a lot of money making sure her Apache could handle whatever came next. This is interesting, she murmured into her microphone as she ran through the new systems. Control, my bird seems to have grown some new teeth while I wasn't looking. The radio crackled back with the voice of Captain Torres, her new flight controller. Those upgrades are classified above both our pay grades, Santos. All you need to know is that your aircraft now has some very special capabilities. Try not to advertise them unless someone tries to kill you again. Maria's laughter filled the communication channel. Roger that, Control. I'll try to keep the fancy new toys a secret until someone gives me a reason to show them off. She was 3 hours into a routine patrol when that reason presented itself. This time there was no advance warning, no radar contacts slowly approaching from the distance. One moment she was flying peacefully over empty desert, and the next moment her threat warning systems were screaming at her from every direction at once. 6 missiles had been fired simultaneously from different locations, all converging on her position with deadly precision. But these weren't air-to-air missiles fired from aircraft. They were surface-to-air missiles launched from hidden positions on the ground. Someone had spent the past 2 weeks setting up an elaborate ambush, positioning missile launchers in a perfect circle around her patrol route. "Well, this is new," Maria said conversationally as she threw her Apache into evasive maneuvers that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. The upgraded defensive systems immediately went to work, launching clouds of flares and chaff while jamming the incoming missiles' guidance systems. 3 of the missiles lost their lock and exploded harmlessly in the distance, but the other 3 kept coming. Maria's new electronic warfare suite kicked in automatically, sending out signals that confused 2 more missiles and sent them spinning off course. But the 6th missile was too close and too smart to be fooled by conventional countermeasures. That's when Maria discovered what her mystery upgrades could really do. A beam of invisible energy lanced out from her Apache, striking the incoming missile and literally frying its electronics. The weapon tumbled out of the sky like a dead bird, its guidance system completely destroyed by whatever high-tech marvel had been installed in her helicopter. "Control, I think someone just gave me a ray gun," Maria announced cheerfully. "That's either very cool or very scary, and I haven't decided which yet." But there was no time to wonder about her new capabilities. Her threat warning systems were active again, showing 6 more missile launches from the same concealed positions. Whoever was trying to kill her had come prepared with plenty of ammunition and the patience to keep trying until they succeeded. Maria had other plans. Instead of continuing to evade and defend, she decided to take the fight to her attackers. Her new targeting system was already identifying the launch positions with incredible precision, marking each hidden missile site on her tactical display like pins on a map. "Time to go hunting," Maria said to herself, her voice carrying that familiar edge of laughter that had become her trademark in combat. She dove toward the first missile site, her enhanced weapons systems painting the target with invisible beams of energy that her opponents couldn't detect or defend against. Her 30mm cannon had been upgraded too, firing rounds that exploded with unusual intensity when they struck the hidden launcher. The entire installation disappeared in a fireball that could be seen for miles, but Maria was already moving toward the next target. The people operating the missile sites had expected to kill her quickly and disappear back into the desert. They hadn't planned on dealing with a pilot who refused to run away, and who apparently had access to weapons technology that shouldn't have existed yet. Their carefully planned ambush was turning into a disaster as Maria systematically destroyed their positions, one by one. "Control, I count 6 hostile missile sites eliminated," Maria reported as the last explosion echoed across the desert. "Someone spent a lot of time and money setting up this little welcome party. Too bad they forgot to invite someone who could actually hit an Apache helicopter." Her laughter echoed through the radio channels again, but now it carried a note of grim satisfaction. The people trying to kill her kept underestimating what she and her aircraft could accomplish, and they kept paying the price for that mistake. Maria was beginning to wonder if they would ever learn, or if they would just keep sending increasingly elaborate death traps for her to demolish. As she flew back toward base, Maria noticed movement on the ground below, vehicles racing away from the destroyed missile sites at high speed. The attack team was trying to escape, but Maria's enhanced sensors could track them easily across the open terrain. She could have destroyed the fleeing vehicles without breaking a sweat, but something made her hesitate. These weren't enemy pilots in the heat of aerial combat. These were people running away, possibly technicians or support personnel who had never signed up to face an angry Apache helicopter in person. Maria decided to let them go, content with having destroyed their expensive equipment and ruined their carefully laid plans. "Some days I love this job," she said softly into her microphone as the distant vehicles disappeared over the horizon. The final confrontation came 3 days later, but not in the way anyone expected. Maria was sitting in the base cafeteria, enjoying what passed for coffee and reading intelligence reports about the arms dealing network she had accidentally discovered, when alarms began blaring throughout the compound. "All personnel to defensive positions," came the announcement over the base loudspeaker. "We have multiple incoming aircraft. This is not a drill." Maria abandoned her coffee and ran toward the flight line, but Colonel Williams caught her arm before she could reach her helicopter. "Santos, we need you in the command bunker. This attack is specifically targeting you, and we can't risk losing our most effective pilot to ground fire. Through the reinforced windows of the command center, Maria could see the approaching aircraft. There were 8 of them this time. Not the sleek, unmarked jets of the Shadow Squadron, but massive military transport helicopters bristling with weapons and armor. Someone had decided that if fighter jets couldn't eliminate one Apache pilot, they would send an entire airborne assault force to finish the job. Those are modified super stallions, the base intelligence officer reported, studying the radar displays. Heavy lift helicopters converted for combat operations. Each one carries a full squad of armed mercenaries plus heavy weapons. Someone really wants you dead, Santos. Maria watched the enemy helicopters deploy in perfect formation around the base perimeter. This wasn't going to be an aerial dogfight or a missile ambush. This was going to be a full-scale ground assault with her as the primary target. The attackers had brought enough firepower to level the entire compound if necessary. They're not just trying to kill me anymore, Maria realized aloud. They're willing to kill everyone on this base just to make sure I don't survive. The first explosions shook the command bunker as the enemy helicopters began their attack. Heavy machine gun fire raked the defensive positions, while rocket-propelled grenades destroyed vehicles and equipment across the compound. The base's defensive systems fought back, but the attackers had overwhelming firepower and the advantage of surprise. Maria couldn't stand watching her friends and fellow soldiers die while she hid in a bunker. Against direct orders, she slipped out of the command center and sprinted toward the flight line through explosions and gunfire. Dancing Eagle sat in her fortified hangar, protected by thick concrete walls but useless as long as she stayed on the ground. "Sorry, Colonel," Maria muttered as she dove into her Apache's cockpit. "But this is what I do." Her helicopter's engines roared to life, just as enemy troops began advancing across the flight line. Maria lifted off directly from the hangar, rising through smoke and debris while her targeting systems locked onto the nearest enemy helicopter. The element of surprise was hers now, and she intended to make the most of it. The first enemy super stallion never knew what hit it. Maria's enhanced weapons system struck like invisible lightning, and the massive helicopter simply fell apart in midair, its rotors separating from the fuselage in a cascade of metal and flame. The troops it had been carrying tumbled toward the desert floor. Their assault suddenly turned into a desperate fight for survival. "This is Santos," Maria announced over all radio frequencies, including the ones the enemy helicopters were using. "You wanted me so badly, here I am. Come and get me." Her laughter filled the airwaves as she engaged the second helicopter in close combat. The enemy aircraft was heavily armed and armored, but it had been designed to carry troops and equipment, not to fight other helicopters in aerial combat. Maria's Apache danced around it like a wasp attacking a bear, striking with precision and agility that the larger aircraft couldn't match. Within minutes, 3 of the 8 enemy helicopters had been destroyed, their burning wreckage scattered across the desert around the base. The remaining attackers began to realize that their overwhelming advantage in numbers and firepower meant nothing against a pilot who seemed to anticipate their every move. Maria's radio intercepted frantic communications between the enemy helicopters. As their carefully planned assault collapsed into chaos, they had expected to face base defenses and ground troops, not a single Apache pilot who fought like she had nothing left to lose. "All units, withdraw immediately," came the panicked command from the enemy leader. "The target has superior capabilities. Mission abort, repeat, mission abort." But Maria wasn't about to let them escape to try again another day. She pursued the fleeing helicopters across the desert, her enhanced targeting system picking them off one by one with ruthless efficiency. Her laughter echoed through their radio channels, a sound that must have filled their final moments with terror and confusion. When the last enemy helicopter exploded against a rocky hillside, silence fell across the desert. Maria hovered alone, in the empty sky, surrounded by columns of black smoke rising from 8 separate crash sites. The most expensive and elaborate assassination attempt in modern military history had failed, destroyed by a single Apache pilot who refused to stop, laughing in the face of impossible odds. "Control, this is Santos," Maria announced calmly. "Threat eliminated. All enemy aircraft destroyed. I'm coming home." As she flew back toward the base, Maria could see ground crews already working to repair the damage from the attack. There would Be investigations and debriefings and probably medals she didn't want. But for now, she was content to have protected her friends and fellow soldiers. Her radio crackled with a transmission from Colonel Williams. "Outstanding work out there, Santos. I think it's safe to say that whoever was trying to kill you has probably gotten the message by now." Maria's distinctive laughter filled the communication channels one final time. "I hope so, Colonel, because if they send anything bigger than 8 helicopters, I might actually have to start trying." The arms-dealing network that had triggered this entire sequence of events was rolled up within a week, its leaders either arrested or fled to countries. Without extradition treaties, Maria Santos returned to routine patrol duties, but her reputation had spread throughout military aviation circles worldwide. They had sent jets after one Apache helicopter, then missiles, then an entire assault force. But through it all, Maria's laugh had been the last thing her enemies heard, a sound that would echo in the nightmares of anyone foolish enough to threaten her again.